I would say I owe my life to the flour tortilla. When my parents came to the U.S., my dad was working like in a shipping warehouse type thing. And my mom, who was never really and has never been like a stay-at-home parent, she just didn't really know what to do with herself. And then one day she was just like, I need to start making some money.
What is one of your earliest significant memories? For Obed Manuel, it's all about food.
This is the story she always tells. She made 20 tacos. Like bean and cheese and like picadillo and egg tacos in a flour tortillas, and she left with 20 tacos and she came back with $20 and she was like, okay, there's something here. So the next day she went out with more, and the next day she went out with more. Wow. And then she would just like walk up and down Jefferson, which is like the main street of Oak Cliff, to all of these like pawn shops and like other, and even some restaurants, and she would just sell them like $1 a taco, $1 a taco, $1 a taco, $1 a taco.
Oak Cliff is a neighborhood in Dallas, by the way, the best neighborhood if you ask Obed. When baby Obed tried his mom's $1 tacos for himself, that set the bar for truly delicious food.
So she would leave like a bowl of picadillo that would cool. She would take the flour tortillas that were left over, heat up 2 of them for me, and then she would just make the taco with the cold picadillo. It was like a perfect temperature type situation where nothing was too hot. And it was just right for me to bite it and eat it.
Yeah.
And so like that's like the best. That's still to date, I think that's the best thing I've ever eaten.
Today, we'll hear a story about food, family, and fatherhood. From Colorado Public Radio, this is Quién Are We? Exploring what it means to be Mexican, Cuban, brown, or however you identify, and diving into the beautiful things that make us who we are. I'm May Ortega. Obed knows good food. No, he's not a chef or a food critic, but man, does he love to smoke meat and talk tacos. And another thing he's really big on? Familia.
I always tell people I was very fortunate. I had a very good dad, just equally as a great mom. But I always felt like he and I had like we were both very quiet, I feel like. Aww. He was very reserved. He was a listener. And I was too. So like
and your brother not so much?
No, my brother's loud. My brother's like my mom. Very social, very, very outgoing. But my dad and I were both very reserved. We were definitely the more quiet ones. I like to listen and I assess, I think. And I think that's a lot of what my dad did. So my family was a very tight unit. It remains that way. It was 4 of us. It was my dad, my mom, my older brother, Carlos, and myself. My parents were immigrants from Mexico. We moved to the United States, all of us, in 1996.
So how old were you when you came?
I was 4.
Okay.
I was 4. My brother was 8. My dad was like not even 40 yet, I don't think.
And Obed was not even 5 years old when he had his first taste of his mama's $1 tacos. And it seems a lot of other people around Dallas agreed with little Obed because business was booming.
My dad was like, yeah, you're making way more money doing this than me working over there. So he quit. Oh. And then he started selling food as well. So.
Wow.
So my dad didn't really cook. He was the driver. You know, he was like one
delivery man.
One did the cooking. The other one handled the delivering, the going out and selling, finding new customers, new clients, and she handled the food and the business side of things. So he did like the shopping. You know, just basically they were a two-person team. You know, my parents would wake up together at like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and they would just prepare food until 6:30, 6:45, and then we would bolt out the door. And these are hundreds of tacos, dozens of tortas, dozens and dozens of tamales. In the winter, they would sell hot chocolate, the abuelita hot chocolate.
Of course.
So it was like this van full of just all this food ready to go to work sites around Dallas to sell food. And it's like, that doesn't come easy. He would put together the tortas. I would see my dad get home in the middle of the day and he would like pass out on the couch. And he would fall asleep for like an hour and a half. My mom wouldn't bother him. But if he went over like 2 hours, she would be like, Jose, despiértate. Like, just because he had to go. He had to go to the store. Yeah. Hey, we got to stock up for tomorrow.
Yeah, the grind doesn't stop.
She's like, yo quisiera dormirme. Like, I would want to take a nap. And then, you know, he would like, oh, okay, fine. He would get up.
I can imagine that very well.
Yeah, no.
Because like, a dad nap is like,
oh, it's profound. Yes. It's profound. Like, it is like the soundest sleep that you could possibly get. I long for that day.
Yeah. Slinging tacos around the city was exhausting work, obviously. But even then, Obed's dad had a second job as a preacher. And this was a far bigger part of all their lives, even bigger than food.
The thing that defined us was that we were a church family. We were an example, right? We were the example for the other kids at church. My parents were the example for the other couples at church. That's just the role you take when you are a minister, when you're a preacher, when you're leading a group of people like that. Most of my memories come from like being in the car with my dad.
Like you're in the back seat or the passenger?
Both. Okay. Like I remember him driving us places. I remember us driving out to small Texas towns like early in the morning, late at night, because my mom, she doesn't drive to this day. He would drive us there in the morning. He would be the one to like preach and do all this stuff, which is very tiresome. Yeah. And then he would drive us back. And then there was a few times when like I went with him on trips by myself. And so like I have a lot of memories of just being in the car with him. And it's just kind of like we could sit there in silence and just like we were just together. And that was great. One time when I was like, maybe I was 10, you know, churches would put together retreats for like men and women separately. And so he signed up to go to one. I believe we were going to Sulphur Springs. Once you get to that area of like East Texas, it's like, or Eastern-ish Texas, it's like, it starts to get very rural. And so like the roads get smaller and they get smaller and they get smaller. This was pre-GPS. Not that my dad ever used GPS. But we're driving out and we like we crossed the 3-hour mark. It's like, it's 10 o'clock and we do not know where we're going. So we're lost. And like my dad just pulls over and like pulls out the map and he's like, I don't know where we are, man. Like he's just like, I don't know where we are.
Just 10-year-old you looking at him like, same, I don't know.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, I was like, okay, that's fine, man. Like we're just here. And I was like, I really have to pee.
Oh,
so
no.
like he was like, me too. So like we just this van that they also used for work is just pulled over to the side of the road. And like I'm like, he's at the front of the car and I'm like in the back, and we're just like peeing on the side of the road
in unison.
And we got back in the car and he was like, let's go home. And so we drove back to Dallas and we got to our little apartment around maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, and we were like, go to sleep. And here's the thing. Here's the reason why that story sticks to me is because like we didn't know where we were when we pulled over to the side of the road to pee. We got back home somehow.
Okay.
I do not know. I don't know if it was like old man stubbornness or what, but he got us back home.
The dad GPS can always take you home.
Yeah, I took a left here. Yeah. So, yeah.
This is one of Obed's favorite memories with his father. It was just the two of them sitting in comfortable silence for hours and finding levity in a less than ideal situation. Obed Manuel was always there for his family be it bringing in money or supporting them however he could. Even when strangers needed a helping hand, he'd rise to the occasion.
It was a hurricane that hit Houston in the early 2000s. One day we were driving around our neighborhood and we drove around a park and we saw this parking lot like full of like vans and trucks that were jammed full of people and like blankets and all this stuff. So he pulled in and it turned out it was all these people who had evacuated from like Houston and like the surrounding areas. And without like hesitation, he was like, hold on, y'all stay here. The church that we were members of at that time was maybe like a mile away from where these people were. So he called like the church leaders. He was like, hey, we have to open the building because there's like 20 people out here. He drove them to the church. He, had them go into the parking lot. They went into the church and like within like 3 or 4 hours, like my dad had called several of the members and some of them who owned like small businesses and stuff. They had brought food, they brought blankets, they brought like mattresses, some of them for like the kids at least to sleep on. But for these people, it was like better. It was about to start raining. So it's like,
oh, wow.
Because like the storm system was about to, like the weakening storm was about to move over Dallas too. And so he like basically let these people in and like just like took care of them. Like the church organized like a little food thing for them. And my parents spent a lot of time there until like pretty much until all those people left.
So that was Obed's childhood. Church, school, the best taco you've ever had. As Obed got older, he became less religious. By the time he was in college, he stopped going to church altogether because he had work and school. And his faith was evolving in a way that pulled him from the teachings he grew up with. During college, he met his future wife, April. And once he got his journalism degree, he hopped around a couple of news jobs until he became a reporter at the very newspaper he grew up reading, the Dallas Morning News.
There was a point where everybody became COVID reporters, in 2020.
Yeah, and you were extremely aware.
My job was to cover like the Latino, Latinx, Hispanic community in Dallas. Like I was very well aware. I was hearing everything. Like the immigration rights groups who dealt with like DACA renewals and all this other citizenship workshops, they became de facto COVID organizations. They were helping people find food. They were helping people find tests. That's how it was.
When COVID hit, it affected just about everybody's life. How could Obed have known that his family would be changed forever? That's after the break. When the pandemic began in 2020, Obed Manuel's job as a reporter made him intimately aware of how the virus was affecting his community.
And I remember looking at the numbers when this is a stat that will never escape me. Dallas is about 40% Hispanic. 60% of the COVID cases in that spring were Hispanic people. So we were overrepresented by 20% of our population.
Wow.
So that told you who was out there working.
Yeah.
That told you who was out there sacrificing themselves. And many of those people did not come home.
And that pissed him off. It made Obed so angry to see his people essentially gambling their lives to keep things running for everybody else. Not everyone had the option to stay home. But Obed's parents did. They locked themselves in their house for months. While Obed was incredibly frustrated with the state of the world, he was also thankful that his loved ones were safe and healthy. Obed dealt with all these emotions partly with the help of some coals and a grill. He began to channel his spare time and everything he was feeling into smoking meats like brisket. This was a new hobby for him, and it sort of developed out of nowhere.
My dad would grill a lot. My dad would grill a lot of meat. Like, he never smoked meat. He actually didn't really like smoked meats.
A lot of like carne asada. Like
yeah, he would do
fajitas
carne
on the
asada, fajitas, chicken. But he wasn't a big meat smoking guy. He was like a grill it fast and then serve it. I do all the grilling things. I had always wanted to live in a place like in an apartment or a townhome or whatever where we could potentially have a grill, and that's all I wanted to do. Was I just want to grill something because I want.
That's why you got a
it
house.
Feels
so
like
you
a
could
growing
get a
up.
grill.
It feels like a growing up moment.
Yeah.
So we moved into a little townhome, and the back part of the house had like this little concrete patio. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm gonna get a grill.
Yeah.
So I got a grill, and then I just kind of started. I mean, I the first time I grilled, I dropped a whole burger right into the coals, and I was like, shit. Like, it fell through the grates, and I was like, damn it. But it's like, it feels like that's the kind of shit that has to happen when you're...
So you learn.
Yeah. So like, you have to be more careful when you're doing stuff.
But as his hobby was heating up, his work was too. And soon, Obed realized his job reporting on immigration, poverty, and COVID was taking a real toll on his mental health. Come August 2020, he knew he needed to quit.
My head had exploded at that point.
Yeah.
I had covered like 2020 protests and all that stuff. I was done. Like, I was burnt. I was cut to the bone.
For sure.
So I called them, and it was like it was like a very like tense moment for me, because like I had to tell my Mexican parents, I was like, hey, I'm gonna stop working and my wife is gonna support me.
Oh no, a Mexican parent's nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I called them, and I was like, I made this food and I need to tell you guys something.
Obed spent hours smoking some pork. He used every skill he had. He really pulled out all the stops for his parents. It was going to be the first time they had his smoked meat. And hopefully they'd focus more on that than on his news that he was quitting his job. So and they came over? And
they came over,
okay.
I served them the pork butt, and then like I told them, and like I don't think they were happy about it. But ultimately they were like, again, because they were religious, they were like, but you should like pray about this, and like you should think about this. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do the same. So it was like it was like a rip off the Band-Aid moment, because like I was not physically well. I was not emotionally, mentally well enough to keep doing it.
They didn't comment on the food. The news of their son's plan to become unemployed kind of eclipsed the rest. Around this same time, Obed's parents said they were going to resume selling their food around the city. From the moment they announced their plan, Obed had a bad feeling about it, and it was for good reason.
The people that my parents sold food to were the people who were considered like essential, like trade work, the other Mexican people in Dallas, for the most part. Mm-hmm. But, there was a while, for a bit there, that everything was shut down. So, like, unless they were, like, city crews or cops or, like, hospital workers.
Mm-hmm. Frontline
workers. Yeah. My parents stayed home. Mm. Like, my parents did stay home.
And did they want to, or were they kind of like, oh, man, we got to work. Like, we got to do something.
They were frustrated because they weren't making any money. And April and I made enough money that we could send them, like, $1,000 each month. Yeah. And my brother was also sending them. So it's like between that, they could cover their mortgage and all the other bills. And we were supporting them that way. And they stayed home for a few months. Like they definitely did. Then in like May is when I think Greg Abbott reopened Texas. A few weeks after that is when my dad was like, we got to push. We got to go back to work too. And I kept telling him like, no, like just stay home. Since like we read the symptoms and like here's who's most at risk and that kind of thing. We were mostly worried about my mom because my mom has a heart condition.
Oh, wow.
She has diabetes. I believe she has some kind of like slight respiratory thing.
Wow.
That might be tied into that.
Yeah.
So we were like terrified that she would be the one to get sick. As the year wore on, like my parents decided that it was time to go back to work.
And it's still 2020?
2020. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe it would be okay because he mostly interacted with people outside. And a lot of people then, like, people were pretty aggressively masking still. So you would think that, like, I was like, okay, fine, maybe he'll be okay. And it went on and on and on. Like, they went back to work until November of 2020. So they were at it for a while.
His parents resumed selling their goods that fall of 2020. Obed decided to begin job hunting around that same time. For a couple of months, things were going well for the family.
And then early in November, my dad called me. And the first thing he said was, he said, I don't want you to worry. He said, no quiero que te preocupes. I don't want you to worry. He said, we just got back from the doctor and we did a test and we're both sick. They were sick for about a week. Then that next week, the second like full week of November is when my mom started telling me, it's like, hey, your dad's really sick. He's coughing a lot. He's doing this, he's doing that. My mom called me like a little bit after the middle of the night. And she was like, you have to come get your dad and you have to take him. She said that like he had like gone to the bathroom and he came back. He sat and then he just like fell back because he didn't have the energy, he didn't have the oxygen in his system to stay upright. My mom would send me photos of him and he was like, you know, like he didn't smile a lot, but he was like trying to force a smile. We drove him to the hospital. They checked him out. Like there at the entrance, they saw the state that he was in. They were like, sir, sit. And they immediately put oxygen on him. He didn't leave. He didn't walk out. He wasn't able to ever again. As they were like wheeling him away, I was like, I don't know what told me that this was it. And I said, Pa, te quiero mucho. Because I thought, if this is the last time I'm gonna see you like this, and that's gonna be that's gonna be the last thing I say to you. And then they opened the door, they took him in. That was it. That was the last time I saw him conscious in person. It was cold outside, and it felt colder than it had ever felt. You know, that is, it's burned into my memory. Like I try not to be angry, and I try not to be really sad about this, because I always try to remind myself that I was very fortunate that I had him. But, you know, and I think about us, and I think about like the pain that we felt for the next 3 months. And I think about how many more people had to do the same thing. And I think about that because I think that's the kind of person that my dad was. He would think about everyone else. And so I just, we had an opportunity in this pandemic to like all of us to like care about each other, and we didn't.
Jose Manuel was in the hospital for 3 months before he died in February 2021. While his father was in the hospital, Obed had a few job interviews, and one of them was with Colorado Public Radio. Just a few days before his dad passed, he got an offer. So while he was still reeling from this tremendous loss, he and his wife moved to Denver.
Obviously, as painful as it was, like, for lack of a better term, like that, like, weight wasn't there anymore. You know, there was a little bit of a release where I was like, fuck, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to us as a family, as a collective unit, and to me personally. But ultimately, I just kind of need to get back to work at this point. I think that they both wanted me to resume my career at some point. So, like, I definitely felt that backing, even from the beyond, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we moved here, and we had already kind of made up our minds that we were going to start a family. Mm-hmm. April, we believe, got pregnant around May of 2021.
I'm sure a lot of things like ran through your mind. One, you guys are going to have a child.
Yeah.
And two, it's going to be a son. What came into your mind at that moment when you knew the sex of the child?
Yeah. It was one of those things where I just kind of knew we're going to have a son. Like, we're going to have a son, and he's going to be a namesake for my dad. Like, I just kind of knew that. But we had decided a few months before that his middle name was going to be Jose. Mm-hmm. So his name is Lucas Jose Manuel. And he does carry my last name. That was something that April and I discussed, and she said, I think it means a lot for you to keep your family name going. I was like, it does mean a lot to me. Lucas is the first person in my family who is a U.S. citizen and does not have to worry about being undocumented, because that is how I grew up. I was undocumented.
And in Texas.
So there's a lot of things that are wrapped up with him that, like, just like, you made it. Like, from the village in La Huasteca where they don't even speak Spanish that my father is from, you're here and we're here. I just kind of like feel this strong desire just to like to make sure he's okay. And like, however that looks, it looks different. Like, it's like he needs more water, he needs more milk. He's kind of upset, and we're not sure why. And so it's like a never ending sometimes thing of like finding what he needs. And I mean, if that's not love, I don't really know what is. Just trying to make sure that somebody's okay until you can't, because the day will come, like it came for my parents, where he'll be out of the house. Pretty much all we can do for him.
Yeah.
So.
Now that Obed is learning how to be a father himself, the patience he inherited from his own dad has come in handy.
What I've learned from smoking and grilling and stuff is that it takes a lot of patience. There's knowing when like the coals are ready, when the smoke is like quote unquote clean. There's knowing when the coals are going to go out, when you need to like move them around. I just think that it's like a labor of like practice. And so I just think anything that will teach him to do something right, I think that's why I would want him to learn that. I hope he appreciates food the same way.
And speaking of his family appreciating food, do you remember that pork butt Obed served his parents when he announced he was quitting his job?
my mom would tell me months later after he passed away, he was like, he really enjoyed that pork butt. Like he really liked it, and he didn't like smoked meat. So
wow.
that was a nice thing that I take. Yeah.
And are there ever times that you wish you could talk to your dad about parenting? Some frustrations or some advice maybe that you're like, oh, I wish he was here to answer this, or just like to vent, right? To a dad, because you're a dad.
Yeah. I always think that, like, yes, I mean, 100%. Like I most of the time I spent a lot of time thinking how he would be with him, because I saw him interact with so many babies at church. Every time a family at church had a baby, it was a big deal for them to bring him, because my dad was a good person. Like my dad was a very kind, community-oriented person, and so he knew some kids from the time that they were born until they like graduated from high school, and they would be like, Hermano Manuel, Hermano Jose. Like they loved him. So like he would have been a spectacular grandfather. I know that in my core, and that is because he was a spectacular father. So I like to channel that as much as I can, because I don't have him now, but in becoming a father, I feel like I'm getting to know him better, because I understand that my feelings towards Lucas come from there. That's where they come from. I'm able to connect with him through Lucas, because the fatherly love that I felt, like I have a place to put it. And in a way, it feels a lot like every time I pick him up, my dad's picking him up too. It's really funny. I was telling April this a few nights ago. This is very personal.
I love a TMI.
I've been staring at my thumbs a lot, because as I've gotten a little bit older, not that old, I'm 31.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten older over the past few years, my thumbs have started to get a little wider. Like wider.
Oh.
And my dad had these huge fucking thumbs. And so like it's gotten more like that since Lucas came around. So like now I look at my thumbs and my hands, like my everyday, like my hands start to look and they start to feel a lot like my dad's hands.
Wow.
They'll never be as rough because I type on a keyboard all day. But I see my hands and like they're kind of changing into my dad's hands. And maybe it's in my head. But my thumb like just kind of looks a lot like that to me.
Interesting.
So I get to pick up Lucas and like kind of see my thumbs go up, and it's a nice moment pretty much every day. I'm Obed Manuel. I'm now a digital editor for NPR's Morning Edition.
He's also a father, and he became a U.S. citizen at the start of this year. Thank you, Obed, for sharing your family's history and opening up about the loss of your dad and the birth of your son. I'm May Ortega. This episode was produced by me with mixing by Luis Antonio Perez. Pedro Lumbrano wrote our theme music. This episode was edited by Erin Jones and Andrew Villegas. You can find a list of everybody who helped make this episode in the show notes. Quién Are We is a production of Colorado Public Radio.